Morning, everybody. So you'll see that on eCampus under the quizzes tab where you would normally take a quiz, we have this thing, this opportunity for you to get some points back on some of the harder questions. All right, everybody settle down now. I can't tell who's talking because everybody's wearing masks. So okay, folks, so check it out. So under the quizzes tab in eCampus, I'll even show it from the student perspective so you can see it. So you have test corrections. So you can go in and there's the five hardest questions that everybody had trouble with on the exam. You can get up to 40 points back. So instead of, giving a curve where I just give everybody like 12 to 20 points, I figured, at least give an opportunity for you to just learn a couple of the things that you had trouble on. You can get up to 40 points back. If everybody does it, then that would, raise the average to where it should be, or what I'm aiming for, which is a little higher. Any questions about the quiz? Were there certain things that, surprised you or that you felt that, were out of left field? Yes. What's that? Which one? The aggregate demand question. I can't think which one that would be.
One of them, like there were two options that said aggregate something, and then there was it started with a C.
Let me. Well, let's go to it. We'll run the item analysis and we'll take a look. So let's see. Item analysis. Let me share screen 2. Okay, so the ones people had the most trouble with. So this one was bonus, and that was one that was, was on the quiz given to me, and I thought that was really hard. I even had trouble with that one, so I made that just a bonus question, so nobody would lose points for getting it wrong. But where's this aggregate one? I don't know, because the ones people had the most trouble with. So this one tripped people up. I tried, I bolded supply thinking that would help, but a lot of people said all the answers were correct. The problem with this one is that we're asking about supply curves, right? So we don't care about consumers. We're just talking about the supply. This question is actually on the corrections. So there's the free answer right there. Another one that I guess, was a little probably surprised some of you. The problem is taking a test online with Respondus. You're not as likely to have paper in front of you with formulas and stuff on it. I understand that makes it a little harder. So the point with the test corrections is like this question is on it, and you can just write the formula down before you open up the test corrections so that you can get this question right. So let me just show you how you would solve something like this real quick. So if you were given So we're told that the price of oranges falls by 3%. Okay. So we know that the cross price elasticity formula So again, like I understand that the cost of using scrap paper is a little higher when a camera's looking at you, and it's it sucks that that's just how it is because of COVID. I'm looking forward to just giving all tests online or all tests, in person, for the future of my career, right? But basically, if you have the formula in front of you, it becomes a lot, I think, clearer, and you can kind of visualize it better. So it's like you have the percent change in quantity of good A over percent change in price of good B. So once you have that formula down in front of you, which you can do for the test corrections, there's like, I think 1 or 2 questions that are like this where you'll want to have a formula in front of you. it becomes a lot clearer. If I said, for example, that the price of good B falls by 10%, let's say, then this number would be -10. And let's say I say that the cross price elasticity is 0.5, so positive 0.5, okay? Well, we're solving for this. We're solving for that. The setup then is 0.5 equals whatever this is over -10. Well, the algebra is just that we take -10, multiply it by 0.5. So -10 times 0.5, positive 0.5, right, equals -5. So the percent change in quantity demanded for good A is that it falls 5%. So on paper, when you have it in front of you, you see it's very simple. But I understand that in a multiple choice context where you don't where you're maybe a little apprehensive about using scrap paper because the thing might flag you for looking away and all that stuff. I understand why a question like this would be pretty scary. So does that clear that up? Any questions about that, what I just did? So again, just write down before you open up the test corrections, look at the directions. I listed exactly what topics would be on it. It's just the 5 questions that people struggled the most with, exactly as they were on the quiz itself, okay? Just write down some formulas in advance, have it in front of you, and you'll be able to do it, okay? Another thing for the quiz corrections before you open it up, I can't give away too many of the answers. It's just 5 questions, but make sure you understand that let's say we had, and this is in section 7.2 between quizzes 33 and 34. Let's say we had a gun buyback program. Okay, so this is a policy that is suggested, relatively often as a way of getting guns off the street. But let's say that supply is nearly perfectly inelastic. Now that may not be true, okay? But let's say theoretically that the supply of guns were nearly perfectly inelastic, and by the government buying them back, we boost the demand. We would see that, being very inelastic, the increase in quantity, call that QS1 and QS2, the increase in quantity supplied by suppliers is very small if it's inelastic. So a gun buyback program would be very effective at getting guns off the street if supply is inelastic. But let's say supply were more elastic, we'll call this SI and SE. Let's say supply were more elastic, quantity supplied would increase quite a bit. So this increase in demand from the government buying guns off the street, if supply is elastic, then producers just start pumping out more guns. And so if supply is elastic, then the buyback program doesn't really work. But if supply is inelastic, then the buyback program works. Because suppliers are not adjusting and just pumping out more guns in response. Understanding that will get you another one of the questions on the test corrections correct. Another one, just understanding that when you're asked about a supply curve, when we talk about elasticity of supply, we're not interested in consumers. We're just talking about how producers adjust production. So something that threw people off was this question that asked about why the supply of oil is more elastic over time. And there was one answer about suppliers and then two answers about consumers. And then there was an all of the above answer and people picked all of the above. But the question was just asking about supply. So, and I forgot to start recording. Oh wait, no, I am recording. Excellent, good, good, okay. So yeah, so you can get it the 40 points back. It's 5 questions exactly as they were on the quiz originally, 8 points each. It's just bonus points. Okay, so think of it as a curve. So you can improve your grade by up to 40 points. Okay. Any questions? I get a lot of complaints about prohibiting backtracking. That's something that's out of my control. I can't allow backtracking on the quiz. That's an edict from above. I can't do anything about it. You know, yeah. So hopefully, you know, you can bring your grades up a little by doing these test corrections. I hope that helps. Okay. Any other questions? Anything? Yes.
Is this tonight or
Tomorrow night. Okay. Any questions? Any other questions?
The one that we asked about earlier, I'm trying to go through the said you had to be on responders. Exactly the question itself, but
You said it had the keyword aggregate in it?
Two answers had aggregate. And 2 had something else.
Not sure. I'm not sure which one that'd be. Also, this is actually one I guess I should review. Well, see this one, for example, this is pretty straightforward. I mean, just showing you all how to do this real quick. You know, the midpoint method, right, would say take the difference in demand. So 20 to 30, 20 minus 30 over the average divided by 100 minus 80 over the average, right? Negative 10 over 25, 20 over 90. It's negative 10 over 25 times 90 over 20. If you do this math, I don't know, calculator. Let's make sure that this one's straightforward. Oh, is it 900? There you go, 1.8. And so you get negative 1.8, but remember with elasticity of demand, we take the absolute value. So it's just 1.8. So this one, I don't think is unfair. I mean, because it's straightforward. I do think the ones that were inverted, where you had to do it backwards, were a little bit out of left field. So again, 2 of those are on the test corrections. There's an opportunity for you to get the points back. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions regarding Friday's quiz? Okay. All right. So moving on, we're going to get into, let me back out of that. We're going to get into price controls. So let's get off of this. Come on. There we go. Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely. There you go. You know, something I do want to say is that I really, you know, don't let the quiz grades get you down too much, because I really think that a lot of you are picking up a lot of the material. Noticing on Packback, I am seeing that a lot of you, you know, even some of you who may have trouble with the quizzes, really are getting the fundamentals of this class, you know, understanding just fundamentally, you know, unintended consequences, you know, changes in elasticity, you know, things about supply and demand. I'm seeing a lot of interesting questions being asked on Packback. The quality of the posts has improved immensely over the past couple months. And so I'm really happy about that. I think the problem, the conundrum of exams, right, is that you have to figure out a way to balance challenging people in such a way that you kind of incentivize or maybe coerce them into, you know, studying the material, But at the same time, in a multiple choice format with, a lockdown browser where you're being proctored, it's a lot different. The ideal exam from me would be short answers where I can just because I think that if you could explain intuition and explain fundamentals, a lot of you would do better on that than having to, for example, solve elasticity. And in real life, you'll never have to solve elasticity by hand. Just understanding the fundamentals of how it works would be enough to get you by in the real world, as a business major, right? And so, unfortunately, there's just some level of analytic stuff that the school expects you to do. And so, let's go to a new section. And so that's kind of the conundrum. That's the place I'm at, right? Where I want all of you to do well. And I'm really happy that a lot of you are picking up on the fundamentals. But then we get hit with a scenario where there's a few questions that are a little more analytical. And it's like, maybe if you were in person with scrap paper and you could flip through your test and go back, it would be a lot different than taking it online from home where you got to show the camera your desk and put your phone away and all that stuff. I understand that it adds a lot of, stress and confusion that wouldn't normally be present, right? So I hope that this opportunity to get some points back with test corrections can try to make up for that that discrepancy. Okay. Let's see, there's 39 people here, 27. Can we get a couple more? No? All right, well, either way, the code's in the top, ABFBCD, okay? What happens if the test corrections provide no benefit, aka you fail it? Well, here's so I noticed that somebody already got a 0 and I just exempted their grade so they could try again. Because folks, I just, I don't want anybody, I want everybody to pass. Okay. I'm really I'm trying to just give as many olive branches as possible. And so this is why the quiz only is worth 10%. This is why the homework is so easy, right? Yes. So you can use any kind of written material you want to help you on the test corrections. F in the chat. That's funny. No, but yes, you can write down the formulas. You can write down notes in advance. Just do it because it's right there. I explain, I can't be too specific, but I did explain it's in the directions as well, what will be on the test corrections. Okay. So yes, you can use any kind of written notes you want, and that's fine. Okay.
So that's the response.
Yes. Yes. Can you post the chapter 9 notes on eCampus? So the chapter 9 notes, you mean the slides? Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I try to keep up with the slides as much as possible. But yeah, absolutely. I plan on posting the slides for sure. Oh yeah. The code is ABFBCD. ABFBCD.
So with that being said, do we have to share our notes to the monitor?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can hold up this notebook
Mhm.
and it'd be perfectly fine.
Yes. Look, it's not some so by the way, the videos, they don't go to some random person overseas. Only I can see them, and I usually don't look at them. Admittedly, I look at the environment checks of people who scored well or got flagged. A few people get flagged, and then I look and it's oh, they were just wearing a mask or something. That's why it flagged them, because it can't see their face. Or they got a really good grade and maybe they never showed up to class. So I look and I say, okay, but the environment, if the environment check's thorough, then it's fine. You know, I don't go out of my way. I'm not going to look through 200 videos, right? But it's really just, I look at the environment check if somebody does really well, or if they get flagged, and then it's like, okay, they put their phone away, their desk is clear. They probably didn't cheat, right? But yeah. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Ruined. Oh no. Oh, ruined your weekend. Oh, I'm sorry. See, it ruined your week. See, folks, this stuff I genuinely feel bad when people do poorly. Like I care. I actually care. I promise you, I care. This is why I gave you the test corrections. So please just do the test corrections. Think about it in advance. Write stuff down, and just take your time. You have half the time to do 1/5 as many questions. Okay. So please just get the points back. Well, it is bonus. It's up to 40 points. It's just added to your grade. It's not like it's literally out of 0. So it just adds 40 points to your raw grade if you get all 5 questions right. Okay. All right. Anyway. All right. So let's get rolling. Okay. So today is price controls. All right. We're going to start with price ceilings. Okay. Price ceiling. So price ceiling is a maximum allowable price. All right. It's the max that some law gets passed maybe that says you can't charge more than this amount of money for this product. Okay. That's a price ceiling. Now, if you put a price ceiling above the equilibrium price, nothing's going to happen because you're putting a maximum above what it's already being bought and sold at. So if it's above equilibrium and there's a potential for these kinds of like trick questions to come up, I'm trying to really look more and try to engage on like the kind of questions that are on Top Hat more in class, because I know that that's often what ends up on the quizzes. So a couple times in Top Hat, it might give you, a price ceiling that's above equilibrium. And it'll be a trick question because it'll ask what the effect is, and ultimately there is no effect. So think about it intuitively. If we put a price ceiling of $1,000 on a tube of Pringles, nothing happens because it only costs $3, right? So ultimately, price ceilings are generally going to be placed below equilibrium because that's when they would actually have an effect. Now, what does that cause? That could cause a shortage. So we talked a month ago about disequilibrium and how if prices are below equilibrium, sellers will want to sell less than buyers want to buy, right? Because we lower the price, buyers want to buy more, sellers want to sell less. That's what the laws of demand and supply tell us. So if you put a price ceiling below the equilibrium price of a good, it creates a shortage. Okay. One of the ways people suffer in a shortage is through waiting in line. So most of the time, you can go to the store and buy what you need to buy. And then you maybe have to wait a little bit in line, at the checkout counter, right? But in general, you go in the store, it's there, you buy it, right? And you walk out. Those goods are there, you're able to get them quickly by merit of prices being able to move freely. But if prices are too low, you might end up waiting in long lines for things. This is where you get the concept of bread lines. This is how we get things like gasoline lines when there's a natural disaster. Just understanding the way this might be graphed. A price ceiling is just that horizontal line. placed below equilibrium. There's your quantity demanded, right? The demand curve tells us at a certain price, here's how much buyers want to buy. So you intersect the price ceiling with the demand curve, that's our quantity demanded. Intersect it with the supply curve, that's our quantity supplied. You see, there's a gap. When it was at equilibrium, they're the same. But when there's a price ceiling below equilibrium, we get a gap, we get a shortage, also called excess demand. Any questions? All right. So again, this is an example of one of those things where you need to know how to do this, but at the same time, as an educator, I'm more interested in you understanding the fundamentals, right? But this is something that's unavoidable, right? In the real world, understanding that a price ceiling creates shortages is probably the most valuable thing. Like the marginal benefit of understanding that is very high, whereas the marginal benefit of being able to calculate exactly how much the shortage is going to be, the marginal benefit of knowing that may not be very high. But being an AACSB business school, there are certain analytical standards that we still have to try to hold people to, right? So this is something you should be able to try to calculate. But think about it. There's my quantity demanded, 310. There's my quantity supplied, 270. So what's the amount of the shortage? Okay, it looks like we're settling around 40. Great. And that is correct, okay? That's correct. So you look at the quantity supplied at $10, 310. Sorry, 270. Quantity demanded at $10, 310. The difference is 40. If this market were at equilibrium at a price of 11, quantity would be 290. And they'd match. Quantity demanded would be the same as quantity supplied, right? All right. Excellent. Any questions about that? Okay. Now, I forgot to animate this slide. It's all at once. I apologize. So we've established that only 270 units actually get sold, right? Demand is 310, supply is 270. The minimum of the two is what actually people can take home, right? So people take 270 units of this good home. Now, the 270th unit in a free market at equilibrium, the 270th unit would be worth $12. Somebody is willing to pay $12 for that. That's what the demand curve tells us. Demand curve says this is what someone's willing to pay for each individual unit. So we can sell, normally, if we set the price to 12, we'd sell the same amount as under the price ceiling. We'd sell 270 units if we set the price at $12. But the price ceiling just means that we're only willing to sell $270 or 270 units, rather. So theoretically, the value of that 270th unit is $12, but people are paying 10 because of the ceiling. So a consumer on the margin might be willing to cover that difference. So that good, that 270th good in the market is worth $12. We can only pay $10 for it because that's what the law says. Maybe we'd be willing to cover the difference. Maybe I'd be willing to bribe the store clerk or bribe a politician to make sure I can get the good. The amount of the bribe would be the difference, $2. Now that's kind of a weird concept. So let's think about that again real quick. So ultimately, 270 units of this good are being put on the shelf. That's because at a price ceiling of $10, that's the most suppliers are willing to sell. But if we were charging $12, that's as much as buyers would be willing to buy. So theoretically, buyers value the 270th unit at $12. Because if we set the price to $12, buyers would buy 270 units. We're being forced down to a price of 10, and as sellers, we're only willing to put 270 on the shelf. But again, the demand curve says that the willingness to pay for that 270th unit on the shelf is actually $12. But buyers aren't allowed to pay $12. They have to pay 10. So if it's worth $12 to me, but the price on the shelf is 10, and I don't want to wait in a line, maybe I'd be willing to slip somebody $2 so that I can get the good right away. Slip them $2 in a bribe, buy it for 10, and just walk out of the store without waiting in line. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about that? Yes. Maybe the store clerk, maybe I give them two, because think about it. It's like I go somewhere, I'm willing to pay $12. I'm only allowed to pay 10, and I'm going to have to wait in line for an hour. I'll slip $2 to the person at the front desk, the store clerk, the bouncer at the bar, right? Whatever it happens to be, who's managing this system where we're rationing the good because there's a shortage. I just give that person money. Yes.
Wait. So I worked at Fort Lauderdale back home,
Okay.
and a lot of times if there's a more limited upcoming release,
Mhm.
sometimes people would come in like the day before
Yeah.
and it'd be like, okay, here's $500, I'll take those. We're like, well, we can't.
Yeah.
But they were gonna go back and try and sell them for like 8. So
That
how's
is
work?
that is exactly the phenomenon I'm expressing here. Exactly it. You have something where you're saying it's in limited supply, right? So you know that more people are going to show up to buy the shoe than you actually have.
Yeah.
Now that's a product of the fact that ultimately your store isn't charging enough for it, right? But let's say let's say these are hundreds of dollars.
Mhm.
You're selling it at 1,000. Someone's willing to pay 1,200 for that.
Mhm.
So theoretically, they'd be willing to give you a $200 bribe so they could guarantee that they can purchase it.
Okay.
That's what you're describing. And so what that person is, that the amount that that person offered you is theoretically, well, literally, the $500 bribe the person offered you is the difference between their willingness to pay and the amount that you're selling it for.
Yeah.
And that's the idea. That's why they're willing to bribe you for $500, because they value it $500 more than what you're selling it for.
My main question comes to the fact that they were willing to bribe, but then they're gonna try and sell it for more. And so,
Their willingness to pay is also just a function of how much they think they're going to get for it.
okay.
Any other questions about that? Yes. Wait, so you're paying the market price for it because you, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So we can actually measure how long a line will get during a shortage. We can actually predict this, okay? So there's a market, there's a shortage because of a price ceiling. Remember, time is a cost. Higher demand, so think about it. Higher demand means the distance between willingness to pay and the actual price is going to be even larger. So higher demand means people are willing to wait longer. We see this in real life. We see long lines. I remember, I think there's videos you can see of people waiting outside. I guess it would have been still GameStop back then to get like the PlayStation 2 in like 2001. People were like camping out to get it, right? They're willing to spend time. Time is a cost. So let's say you're willing to pay $3 for something and there's a price ceiling at $1. Well, your willingness to pay is $3. So you'd be willing to make up that difference somehow, either by spending an equivalent amount of time that you value at $2, or maybe again, bribing the person selling the goods so that you can skip the line, right? So you'd be willing to wait in line for some amount of time equal to $2 for you. You're willing to pay 3, you can only pay 1. You'll make up the difference. You're willing to wait some amount of time that you value at $2. And so what we would see over time is that the actual length of the line will settle down to around whatever that distance is. So the length of the line is going to settle down to what a buyer is willing to pay versus what the actual price is, that difference. So if you, the lower the price ceiling, right, the further down you push the price, the longer the line gets. If you make something free that's normally $500, people are going to be willing to wait hours and hours, because $500 is probably worth many hours to lots of people, right? If you're making $10 an hour, $500 is like 50 hours for you. Yeah. So if you could get, if you could wait in line, I bet plenty of you would be more than happy to wait in line for some hours to get a $1,400 stimulus check. Now, of course, you don't have to wait in line because it just goes right to you. But if there were somewhere where you could line up to get a stimulus check, we would expect that the line would be about as long as whatever amount of time is on average worth $1,400 to people. Now, different people's willingness to wait will be based on how much they value their time. If you're a brain surgeon, it's probably only like 3 hours worth of time for you, right? Because you're probably getting paid like $500 an hour. But if you're working at a coffee shop, you'd be willing to wait, theoretically many, many hours to get $1,400, right? And so again, over time, we see the time price move toward the distance between the willingness to pay for the quantity supplied at that unit and the actual price. So we can actually predict how long a line will get based on the ceiling and how much people value it.
Is there a numerical example of this? Like you can say, oh, there's going to be 20% of this city is going to be great.
Yeah, so like a real life numerical example?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something that's actually studied in empirical economics experimentally. So there are actual research papers on that. That you could just, we could probably find them right now, but I'll be pretty embarrassed if I can't find one, and then I'll look stupid. But let's see. Wait time, Google Scholar Economics. I don't know what the right search would be. So it seems to be mainly studied in healthcare, because what do we have in, like for example, the Canadian healthcare system? It's much lower cost in the United States, but there are higher wait times, right? So that can be experimentally studied. People have a willingness to wait based on the fact that the price is lower than it would be at equilibrium. Let's see if I can find wait time, price ceiling. Google Scholar. Let's see. Does he do wait time in this? Yeah, so there you go. So people do study this empirically. This is like, don't worry, you don't have to know what any of that is. But yeah, this is something that's studied experimentally in economics, actually doing real experiments. You look at, I bet there's even papers, I bet I could find it somewhere if I look long enough, papers about people's willingness to wait outside, an Apple store for the new iPhone, right? You can study this numerically, absolutely. And you would probably find that you could find like an equilibrium measure of how people value their time. most people value their time about around what their hourly wage is, because that's their opportunity cost, theoretically. Now, the numerical examples we'll do are going to be a lot easier. You'll just be given numbers, okay? Okay, so this is just another way of looking at it. You see the time cost, and you can actually measure the value of wasted time. You could take the time cost and actually multiply it by the actual quantity that people get. Time cost times quantity is the formula for a rectangle, right? The area of that rectangle is literally the value of all the time wasted waiting in line. So that can be measured. Okay. Good example of a very famous price ceiling was Nixon. Excuse me. God, that's so embarrassing. This is what happens when you're shouting for like an hour at a time. Your voice cracks. It's crazy. Nixon's price freeze of 1971. Okay. Nixon ordered a 90-day price freeze on almost everything. Now, not literally everything. We're actually going to talk about, they froze the price on chickens, but not feed. And we're going to talk about the just absolutely disgustingly horrible unintended consequence of that. It's very disturbing. But anyway, so shortages began occurring, right? We're in a period of intense inflation. Prices are naturally rising. However well-intentioned it may be, Tricky Dick, as people affectionately called him back then, froze prices for 90 days. Shortages started happening in a bunch of different markets. And this kind of threw the economy out of whack, because we've talked about how prices help coordinate people's actions across the country. So there was a steel shortage, which shut down a lot of construction. Factories started to close. Firms relying on those factories had to shut down temporarily. A shortage of steel made it harder to drill. We were in the middle of an energy crisis, and we couldn't drill domestically for oil because we didn't have any steel. Made things even worse. This is kind of the disturbing example. There was a ceiling on chickens, but not chicken feed. So farmers found that it would be more cost effective if they just killed millions of chickens. This really happened. You can Google it. It was cheaper than feeding them and selling them. They just killed them. Pretty disturbing. This was one of the unintended consequences of the price ceilings. Okay. So you can see how seriously bad things might happen when a well-intentioned policy like this is put in place, right? You can't, now if they had put this policy in and made it illegal to kill your chickens, maybe that problem would have been avoided. But you can't cover all your bases, right? It's not illegal for farmers to do that, so they did it. Okay.
Can't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Good pun. All right.
That's all.
Okay. So during this time, so here's something to know, and this is a good example of how prices coordinate things. Oil is very valuable in New England during the winter and not very valuable in California and New Mexico during the winter. I mean, that's it, right? It's not as valuable because it's warm down there. You need a lot of oil to heat your homes. So that winter of 1971, what do you think happened for people in New England when they tried to get oil? Normally, people in the Southwestern United States, where the value is lower because the uses are not as important when it's warm, there's an incentive to ship it across the country. It's expensive to do that. It costs a lot of money to ship oil from California to Maine. It's expensive, right? But there was a price freeze. Exactly. So yeah, both. They didn't ship nearly as much oil because the incentive to get oil all the way across the country, it's very costly. So you have to, people are willing to pay a premium. If prices are frozen, there's no incentive to spend all that money shipping the oil across the country. So people did very poorly that winter. A lot of people suffered. People who were willing to pay a premium for oil couldn't get it. And so it was a very cold winter for them. And so, yes, there was a lot of lines and wait times for stuff like that. And of course, they did not ship nearly as much oil to the Northeast. Okay. So again, higher demand, higher price coordinates people's actions across the country from where it's sunny and oil is not as needed to where it's very cold and oil is in high demand. Another problem with price ceilings is that they might cause the misallocation of resources. So normally, we assume that goods are generally used for their highest valued uses. So for example, the oil goes to the people in the Northeast who need it the most. But when you place a price ceiling, it's not guaranteed that the people with the highest valued use are going to get it. The oil might sit in California where no one really cares about it. Or the person who already filled their basement 10 feet high with toilet paper just gets to the store before you and fills up their cart again with more toilet paper. This is what happened. This really happened, right? The people who didn't have any toilet paper couldn't get it. And people who were stockpiled for, Armageddon were still just buying it up. Misallocation of resources. Now that there's a shortage, all it takes is somebody just getting to the store before you do, and it's gone, no matter how much they value it. Okay, so it might cause the misallocation of resources. We don't actually know that the people who value it the most are going to get it. If there's a shortage, people who value it very little might end up getting it. Okay. I'll get through the last couple slides real quick, and then I'll get you out of here. And I will post these slides, I promise. Another possible effect, reductions in quality. Sellers might reduce the quality of their goods because of the price ceiling. They can't charge as much, so they reduce the quality to save money, okay? So this could be less cheese on the pizza. It could be less amenities on an apartment that has rent control, right? Any of these things. Anytime you place a price ceiling, maybe sellers just reduce the quality of their product to save money. All right, we'll pick up there on Wednesday, and I will see you then.